Joining us for this live stream event. So I'm Jeff Allen. I'm co-founder at the Integrity Institute. Just to give you a little bit of a background on it, if you're not familiar, the Integrity Institute is part professional community, part think tank. And on the professional community side, we're made up of hundreds of trust and safety and integrity professionals. So these are people who have worked on social intranet platforms, from within the companies on trust and safety teams or integrity teams or any related problems. So we're the people that have fought foreign influence, from the inside and, fought for youth safety and youth well-being online from the inside. Um, and so on the community side, if you think you are an integrity professional, we certainly encourage you to apply. We do a lot of networking events. We have spaces for people to just chat with each other and connect. And then, of course, on the think tank side, we try to collect and harness all that experience and expertise that integrity professionals and trust and safety professionals have and connect and share it with the outside world. And this event is definitely one of our efforts in that direction. So Nick Shen was our elections resident fellow. And he'll be presenting on some of the work that he did in his time as a resident fellow with the Integrity Institute. Nick has had a pretty fascinating career. So he, early on was working internationally in Kenya for the Peace Corps. He did a few years at the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security, including work for refugees and being a case manager for refugee status. He then actually transferred over to Snap, where he worked on the trust and safety team, covering issues such as cooperation with government officials and law enforcement, as well as the typical standard trust and safety issues that we're all familiar with. He was a resident fellow at the Integrity Institute for a bit under a year. And during his time here, he spent a lot of work on elections and specifically did a really big research project around foreign influence and elections. Um, and so with one note for the audience. So if you have any questions, please do feel free to drop them into the chat on LinkedIn. And there should be time for a Q&A at the end where we'll be able to get into your questions. Okay, cool. And with that, I will hand it over to Nick. So take it away.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate the intro. Yeah, I'm happy to have everybody here to present on a particular research topic that's very close and true to me. Um, Let me share the deck right now. Uh, this presentation is a very high level overview, since we want to be respectful of how much time we have of a larger research paper that Integrity Institute is planning to publish. The paper itself will be roughly content-wise about like 113 pages. So you can imagine how we want to try and hit some of these main points, give you guys some broad level overviews of the research that was done and kind of the big takeaways. So in general, I think in today's landscape, one of the hot topics and something that is broadly well known now on a mainstream level is how technology and voices online impact people's political discussions, social topic discussions, and specifically in this one, how it relates to US elections. So right now, we're going to take a look at how technology has impacted our 2020 elections and our most recent 2024 US elections. So I just want to start off by giving a brief timeline on some of the pretty big major events that played key roles in shaping kind of our digital landscape as it is today. In the beginning of January, March of 2020, we all know that COVID kind of swept the globe. That really changed the dynamic of how we as a society interact with online communities. Since we weren't able to even go out, interact with our friends and families and loved ones directly, we were forced to look at screens. So screen time, rose. Our dependency on all these digital platforms and technologies to be able to connect with each other drastically increased. Then moving forward into January, we all know about the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. That attack was very organized and communicated through online forums and platforms. And that, kind of spurred a whole new discussion and policy thought on how we govern or not govern online spaces. Then October 2021, we have Frances Haugen that testified before Congress, former Facebook employee, that advocated, online safety over profits. This spurred topics like teen safety as it relates to, home feed algorithms. April 2022, Elon Musk buys Twitter, rebrands it as X. A platform that is quite largely seen as the internet town hall for major discussions and sharing of ideas, becomes drastically changed in terms of its moderation philosophy. And then November 2022, ChatGPT is publicly released in a mainstream way, and generative AI enters, to the hands of every single person with an internet connection. TikTok then in March to September 2023 faces a potential ban from the US that kind of shows us a landmark in time where technology is now very much in the eyes of US government regulators. November 2024, we had record online political advertisements for the elections. Spending reached $1.35 billion just through Google and Meta alone. So talking about the money flow, how much dedicated, monetary funds are actually going into these tech spaces now. 2024, the U.S. election is officially certified by all states, and then by January 2025, Trump is inaugurated as our new 45th president. So that's a quick timeline of where we now we're kind of where we are today. I'll go here, and I want to jump over next to first our 2020 election. So kind of rewinding back a little bit, if you can kind of think back beyond, even though it's been, quite a lot of things that have happened in the last 4 to 5 years, our 2020 election, and taking a look at like what had happened during that time, what are the things that we saw and learned, and what are the things that we didn't. All right. So monetizing, So monetizing, it's all about the money here, right? Monetizing strategies for foreign influence operations. Any good operation is not going to be run to its full capability without the cash in hand. So how do these operations make money? One of the big things that we saw was redirecting traffic to disinformation and ad-heavy websites. This is done through systems of what, a lot of you already know, being digital safety professionals, as like troll farms, right? And even in the mainstream, I think this has kind of been sensationalized with images of people in massive warehouses and, hundreds of phones in their hands or laptops in their hands, all creating kind of these inauthentic coordinated behavior for the purposes of disinformation, but also for money making. A lot of these sensationalized profiles, pages, posts, they eventually either have ads directly within them, or they direct users after their engagement to pages that are considered, we call them MFAs, or made for advertising pages. And these are pages that are dedicated and just completely saturated with, online ads. So you probably remember, at least in some point in your time, maybe it's if you're clicking on an article that you thought was like really, really, clickbait or, emotionally triggering, or maybe you clicked on you accidentally clicked on a link that you thought was going to take you to one place, but it took you to another, and it was just completely filled with ads. Those are MFAs. Some of these operations also took advantage of platform monetization features. Facebook, for example, has their ads break program where they allow video content creators to insert short ads into their videos, and they get an ad share revenue. YouTube does the same. Each platform has their specific types of monetization features, and influence operations are absolute pros at this. They know exactly how to manipulate these systems to generate ad revenue. And then selling high following pages after these inauthentic accounts accrue massive amounts of following into their pages through sensationalized or clickbait kind of topics. They go and then are able to sell some of these pages to those individuals that want high follower accounts. And then click farms, similar to like troll farms, they're just networks of either individuals or bots that artificially inflate engagement metrics. So a lot of companies, as most of you know, have different metrics for how users engage with their products, their features, and that actually, in turn, shows ad partners and ad revenue. So it likes, shares, comments, all this stuff. And these click farms are dedicated to manipulating and really taking advantage to artificially inflate what appears to be organic traffic, but is inorganic traffic for advertising revenue. So this is all about the money. The next slide is also about money, spending money and making money. This is kind of the money cycle of disinformation. So like in November of 2017, the U.S. House Intelligence Committee, part of the U.S. government, publicly published information on an extensive activity conducted by the IRA, which is the Internet Research Agency. They're one of the most famous historical online, disinformation, let's say, and online influence operation groups on Facebook, including a number of advertisements as exhibits and a representative sample to the public. So already by 2017, this type of activity and the scale of it was already well known to the U.S. government. Public announcements also, beyond government and into going into private platforms, public announcements by Facebook and Twitter revealed that between January of 2019 and November of 2020, more than 10,893 Facebook accounts, 12,588 Facebook pages, 603 Facebook groups, all these Instagrams, 294,096 Twitter accounts were taken down by platforms. This kind of was a representative of now platforms surfacing and being aware of all these inauthentic activity and behavior on their platform and what they were doing to both retroactively and proactively take them down. During all these takedowns, within the same time frame, Facebook also reported that almost $10 million was spent on political advertisements by cyber troops operating around the world. So as these big platforms are taking down inauthentic behavior and accounts, they're also seeing that these same accounts are spending exorbitant amounts of money on political advertisements. So what does that tell us? That tells us, it gives us kind of a nexus now into inauthentic coordinated behavior and the intention behind it, right? If they're creating all of these accounts and spending exorbitant amounts of money on very political targeted advertisement, they want you as the readers and user demographics of the platform to see or not see and on specific political or social topics. And we'll go into that in a bit. Here's kind of a quick summary of some of the disinformation tactics that are referenced and researched in this research paper. I highly recommend everybody go in. I mean, it's 113 pages, but you can obviously pick and choose where you want to go into the paper to see some of the nuances and specifics of how these things are being done, the scale of what they're being done. Um, but things like platform exploitation, right? Like foreign actors using the same techniques as before, troll farms, creating fake think tanks and NGOs and well-known news outlets, using bots and AI generated personas to like really the seed and create the type of sensationalized and divisive content across platforms like Facebook, Twitter, X now, YouTube, and Telegram. It's well known now in mainstream knowledge that you know perhaps the person that you're arguing with or talking to or agreeing with online is not a real person, right? That's fairly well known knowledge. But how we know that knowledge is kind of through these investigative discoveries. Narrative manipulation is the classic uh, hot topic of the day. What are the things that we Americans are really passionate about and are controversial and like want to have discussions on, right? We're very proud of our country and military. So veterans are definitely a very focused group. Minority populations like Black Americans are popular. LGBTQ populations and communities are very popular. So these foreign influence operations are very, very aware of the stuff that we want to talk about and the stuff that we're really emotionally passionate about. So it is kind of like a psychological manipulation here. There we saw, across the board different types of things on disinformation, voter fraud. We everybody loves a good conspiracy theory, whether they take it seriously or not. The decay of U.S. society, geopolitical sentiments. Next is information laundering. So, like, how do these foreign operations convince us that their information that they're disseminating and pushing out is real, is organic? How are they able to dupe us in these senses? Information laundering now is like this technique where a lot of fake stories or fake information gets funneled and sprinkled through sometimes real and organic outlets, right? Whether they create a fake news site that appears like a legitimate one, or whether they recruit, real American voices and influencers, and how they reshare information. Sometimes, throughout the paper, we've seen disinformation outlets that have literally copy pasted articles from the Wall Street Journal or from reputable news outlets, and then inserted falsified information in between them and then relabeled it as their own. So if someone were to be fact checking, right, some of these articles, they would probably see that 90% of it is accurate. It's covered by the top 15 news outlets in the US that are very reputable, but then 10% of that information is intentionally kind of like seeded in there to kind of hide it. Proxy networks. These are the kind of different kind of fake websites and domains and kind of what we call mirrored content to just kind of flood the information ecosystems. And migration and invasion. So as platforms and outlets, really start to up level their enforcement, procedures and operations, and take down all these inauthentic accounts and behavior, these bad actors have to go somewhere. So they go into more encrypted platforms. You probably see a lot of the times, a bad actor or a malicious account might post something that appears gray area. They're not specifically mentioning anything that would be against the platform's policies, but it's a little bit kind of in the gray zone. But then they'll post a link and be like, hey, if you want to read more, if you want to talk about this more, join this Telegram channel, join this, whatever, pick and choose your alternative platform. So this migration and evasion technique was also kind of fairly well seen. I'll go through these really quickly for the interest of time. Some things that platforms did to mitigate some of this behavior in 2020. Context labels and information hubs, search and feed interventions. Like, remember if you search for something that might not be completely accurate, and the platform gave you kind of like some push notification warnings, be like, hey, just an FYI kind of thing. Algorithmic downranking, reporting and fact checking. Like some platforms really took a lot of pride in 2020 on how much they fact checked the information on their platform and through the different organizations that they work with. Platform election integrity and agency collaboration, the collaboration between platforms and government to make sure that the information, especially related to elections, was accurate. And then, some of the policies that these tech platforms used as well was internal and external facing policies to restrict political ads and spending controls. You saw previously, $10 million is being spent on political Facebook ads. We probably want to, rate limit some of those spending amounts based on, very targeted heuristics of who is spending the money on those ads. Content and account enforcements, obviously, all these platforms now, but also back then started creating these more proactive approaches towards content and account enforcements to make sure that, disinformation didn't get kind of out of control. And then transparency, reporting, and data access. I think this is a really important one, even going forward into the future, is transparency, right? There's a big push now for transparency, decentralization, and just having the visibility for the public to see what is actually happening, behind the scenes for ad spending, for content creation, for whatever it is on platforms, because we, as the users, are the customers, right? And we, as customers, we want to know and have the most information possible of what we're digesting. All right, now going into 2024 election, the most recent one. Some big differences here. We saw, and you'll see in the research paper, huge major upticks in the sophistication and scale compared to previous election cycles. 2020, we saw the traditional big troll farms, foreign state media pumping out all types of different strange information. We had the uncertainty of COVID-19, which, influence operations took full advantage of. And then in 2024, we saw a much more adaptive, nuanced, covert approach through advanced technologies. So obviously, Gen AI. You remember when these kind of Gen AI models first came out, right? Like even something as stupid as the image models, right? Creating fake people with like 15 different fingers and teeth that didn't make sense and all this really weird stuff. And now we're at a point where it's very difficult to discern whether something is artificially generated or organically produced. Deepfake technologies, the same thing, impersonating political figures, institutions, influencer voices. They also, in 2024, we also saw the use of like a lot more authentic US domestic voices to seed false narratives. We'll go into this one a little bit more too. Campaigns were more designed and targeted to blend in, and the blurred spaces, right? We had, in 2020, we had these very we learned that we set like very targeted and specific policies for verified official individuals, official accounts, paid advertising, all this stuff. But the influencer kind of trend wasn't as blossomed as it was in 2024, where now in 2024 you had all these very high following TikTok influencers and podcasters and stuff, where those policies were not yet at those maturation levels. So what are some of the new strategies here? So I mentioned, before, um, influencers, right? Influencer-led content generated 50 to 70% higher engagement rates compared to standard non-political posts. Um, so this shows like kind of really the magnitude of influence that these like online influencer voices were able to kind of give towards platform users. And the foreign influence employees in one instance were indicted by the U.S. Department of Justice, and they were found with evidence funneling nearly $10 million to create a U.S. based media company. And this particular U.S. media company, but many similar to it, would directly pay online influencers to talk and bring up certain topics that aligned with their own self-interest or self-countries and government interest. And we found that one influencer was offered $400,000 a month and $100,000 signing bonus, which was performance-based incentives to disseminate the very particular disinformation topics that foreign entity wanted in the public. And this is all public information. If you go into this research paper, you'll see in detail how and at what scale this was done, and you'll see a link that will bring you to a U.S. government website that will show you the entire sealed indictment, right? That the DOJ charged here. Some of the just like highlighted new disinformation tactics. I kind of mentioned it already before. The very high increase in recruited online influencers that were a lot of the times unknowingly doing disinformation operations for foreign entities. Content amplification, going back to how influence operations and their really professional knowledge of engagement, they were able to use these new tools to really amplify their content beyond like scales that we had never even seen before. And yeah, political disclosures and money as well, sponsorships, specific cases against very prominent high-level U.S. political influence voices on podcasts and YouTube, and mainstream platforms in general, and like how the non-disclosure of money led to like large government investigations along the side. And the last one is like offline infrastructure. We don't know what we don't know. If it's not online and something is being done in person in the physical world behind closed doors, it makes it much more difficult to connect those dots and make that nexus. Generative AI operational scaling. I mean, this is the classic. You probably even seen on platforms that you wouldn't expect to see things that Gen AI is creating. Back in 2024 was like LinkedIn, right? Like we saw multiple instances where there were fake news articles and fake news outlets that were producing these kind of bogus articles written by fictitious profiles that were then backed up by fictitious profiles created on LinkedIn using, Gen AI content. and you'll see this as a common theme in the paper as well. I reference a lot of government documents, a lot of executive orders, indictments, subpoenas, search and seizure warrants. Like, so in this one in particular, July 2025, the DOJ announced it seized two big domain names and surfaced 968 social media accounts tied to influence AI-driven bot farms that were spreading disinformation. Um, you can see in this one in particular, they were 968 accounts on X. Yeah, some of the emerging, platform influence operation behavior. Again, the Gen AI and integration of paid influencers. But then, what we didn't see in 2020 that we saw a lot more in 2024 were offline threats and real world harm. Some of you may remember at the ballot box when it was time for us to go out to the ballot box in person to go and vote. There were multiple bomb threats that were targeted at polling and voting locations. Those bomb threats were traced back to internet domains that were listed in foreign countries. So it was a high representation that external foreign influence operations did not want U.S. voices to go out there and vote, and perhaps targeted for specific locations and political views. And on both sides of the spectrum, there were even assassination attempts on both sides of the political spectrum, right? On the president, on other on senators and congressmen. So this is when kind of the online harm translates into real world harm. And yeah, some of the platform shifts that started coming out in 2024. Content moderation changes, fact checking changes, and also government and platform collaboration. Like I mentioned before, U.S. government and big tech platforms wanted to ensure, in some instances, that some of the information related to elections was accurate to what the government wanted to confirm on. If you saw a social media post online in a feed that said, hey, don't go to this voting location anymore, it's closed, that was something really frequent that happened. But government entities needed to work in real time with these tech platforms to make sure that that information was accurate and correct. I'm going to go into a little bit about the AI bot structure and how sophisticated it was in 2024. So this was uncovered by a coalition of cybersecurity agencies, US FBI, the Canadian version of it, and international security, like very reputable international security agencies, uncovered a AI software package created for online social media bots called Ameliorator. This software was a representation of like really the power of what one piece of software within the hands of bad actors, like the scale of what it can do. So they found like some big things, right? Like the software was able to create real, authentic looking social media personas, and at mass scale. They were able to deploy also content, not only to the media personas and profiles, but the content itself that looked like authentic behavior. They were able to mirror other different type of disinformation and bot personas that were already in the space. They were able to amplify any existing false narrative. So, for example, you can think if a real or a real authentic voice, and a real person behind a profile starts to talk about some kind of, false narrative, these bots were able to target on that particular content from an organic source and amplify it. So this becomes kind of a little bit into flowing into that information laundering technique, where maybe the information is not accurate, but it came from a real individual. But now you have the amplification of that false narrative using, uh, inauthentic voices and personas. And they were able to formulate messages that were, became very targeted and specific based on the archetype of the bot that was created. Again, deeper, we'll go into this deeper if you wanted to go check out the research paper. It is pretty incredible if you get into the nuances of it. Yeah, I believe there's a link in the research paper that will even show you some of the technical aspects of how this works if you are interested in, if you're a cybersecurity individual and interested in some of this stuff. But basically, this is kind of the flow, right? You have this administrator panel creates these bot personas that are like very, very well organized into what they call taras, which are like what they also call souls and thoughts, which is a little bit of a creepy terminology. But souls being the actual profiles of the bots, right? Specific heuristics, specific parameters that create the archetype of the profile, right? And they're always going to go for these, very commonly hot and divisive type of topics. Thoughts were the kind of scenarios and actions that were made on behalf of, the profile of the soul or a group of souls, like a community. And this allowed, those bot personas to engage using like, share, repost, comment, and everything else a platform has available for engagement. And you can see that, how these bots were then created and then infiltrating into the social media ecosystem and, amplifying content. These bots really played three main roles that we saw. One was a full persona, what they call full persona. And these bots have like really complete profiles with AI generation, cover photos, names, locations, bios, and political views. So at first glance, they really look like a fully comprehensive profile of a real person. These are the most active ones, and those are the ones that are really spreading a lot of disinformation, where people are maybe arguing or having discussions with others online, and they're either facilitating or at least a part of of those conversations. The minimal bot profiles were accounts that really had like very little information, but their main objective was to just like and boost content. So if a particular narrative was interesting for a foreign influence operation, and they said, "Hey, we want to focus on that," they would just have these minimal bots go and just really boost the engagement on those posts, right? It's like if you go to any tech platform and you see a post, you will see the number of likes or comments and everything in those engagements, but you might not spend enough time to go through the entire list to see if those thousands of engagements were actually coming from authentic profiles. And then the third is authenticity. These are built using real data scraped by tools, so they don't use AI generated images and stuff. They steal images of real people, and they really mimic real user behavior by growing the account. They care more about the long-term strategy here for growth by gaining followers and really trying to mimic real behavior as much as possible. Some tools that so okay, yeah. So this slide kind of is representative of like what were some of the reactions in 2024 um, from tech companies and from from the digital landscape of things. Um, tools that were removed. A previous slide was showing during 2020, some tech platforms took a lot of pride on the amount of fact checking that they were doing, right? And by 2024, that fact checking philosophy was completely reversed. So this kind of indicated a change in a lot of tech platform philosophies, right? How they saw content moderation, how they saw how they were going to deal with inauthentic behavior on their platforms. Transparency reports, you know, almost every single tech platform, major one at least now, has some sort of comprehensive transparency report to let us as consumers and users see what is behind the curtains a little bit on the types of content that these platforms are showing or not showing, the amount of due diligence that they're putting in on taking content down or restricting on malicious behavior or inauthentic behavior. In 2024, we saw a lack of some transparency reports from platforms, and and some platforms chose to choose product decisions, let's say, that you know were more engagement heavy, but less proof of identity heavy, right? If someone is able to pay to promote their account and have it appear to be authentic, well, money doesn't really essentially prove authenticity, right? In that sense. And some of the resources that were removed too were pretty significant especially on the government side. The State Department's Global Engagement Center had done countless amounts of work to fight foreign online influence operations and disinformation campaigns. The FBI also had a dedicated foreign influence task force that was dismantled. The DOJ had a team called the Klepto Capture Task Force that was really targeted, aimed at financial sanctions against particular foreign entities as it related to disinformation and influence operations. That was also dismantled. And even the U.S. Cyber Command was instructed to pause on specific foreign investigations that were related to these foreign influence operations as an ecosystem. So less resources in 2024. We're coming up to time here, and I want to save a little bit of time just for maybe a couple comments or questions. But I took this directly from my one of my paragraphs in the conclusion of the paper, and I think it captures some of the sentiment of the paper's purpose and how we might be viewing things, right? And I hope throughout this presentation, as digital safety professionals and advocates, you're thinking not only seeing okay, yes, I'm seeing proof and scale and of how these operations work, and how disinformation and foreign influence is conducted, but as a digital safety professional and advocate, what can I do? What can my company do? What can we do as a community to curb some of these things, especially as potentially resources start to dwindle? What are some steps that we can take to prevent these things from happening? So yeah, new AI tools and advanced tactics have shown that to accelerate more convincing disinformation and scale deception with a focus on amplifying divisive US narratives instead of producing standalone fabricated stories. The scope of these campaigns were not limited to any single platform or audience segment either. They grew increasingly focused on highly specific online communities and pre-existing polarizing topics using tailor-made strategies. It is absolutely critical to emphasize that the main issue at hand is not partisan. For purposes of foreign influence operations, your political affiliation does not matter. What matters is that foreign state actors are weaponizing the US information landscape to manipulate, monetize, and influence American public opinion towards decisions and outcomes aligned with their own geopolitical interests and not ours. The US cannot allow foreign states to subtly take away authentic American voices by impersonating and distorting public opinion at scale. So I hope that kind of resonates a little bit with all of us because we want, as our country in the US, we want to be the voices that are representative and reflective in our leadership, right? In how our society is run. Um, if that slowly starts to disintegrate and go away because we can't tell the difference of an authentic US voice online, that's a really big problem, I think, that we need to all think about deeply and recognize. Thanks. Yeah. Jeff,
Awesome.
you want to?
Yeah, thank you so much for running through all that, Nick. And you can find a link to the report in the chat on the in the LinkedIn chat on the LinkedIn Live. And we have a couple of questions from chat, and so maybe we'll just run through those and take us to the hour. Okay, first question. Does the risk landscape of election integrity change with people getting their information from different platforms that are associated with different sides of the political spectrum? So, for example, there's True Social and there's Blue Sky, and the political alignment of the users of those is like very different, right? So, users are now, so like American citizens are now kind of self-segregating themselves into different platforms according to their political alignment. And do you think that will sort of change how the bad actors, the foreign influence operations think?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think that, that shift creates it's a little bit controversial, right? Because like in one way, you can see that as okay, we're just siloing ourselves into platforms with similar users and people that we tend to agree with on a political and ideological level, right? Is that healthy? Does that create a balanced ecosystem and in the weight of different ideas and opinions? Um, or is that something that we want to not necessarily drift towards, and we want to create more of a centralized town hall where people can voice different opinions and have like these actual differences of opinion discussions. In terms of foreign influence operations, we will probably see influence operations hitting platforms that have definitely the most eyeballs, and definitely the most money. But it wouldn't surprise me to see if some of the smaller platforms start to see some of that trickle down effect of, hey, like if I'm an influence operation, there's a whole demographic I'm missing, and if I want to change and slowly, subtly, you know, change the opinions of that demographic, I will definitely want to slowly seed accounts and information into that ecosystem if it's completely separate and siloed from the rest, right? So it's definitely something that I think those platforms should be aware of, and any new platforms that see users migrating should be aware that they are a potential trickle down target to disinformation and influence campaigns.
Yeah, for sure. I think it just highlights that, like, um, even if you're a small platform, you still have to take these things seriously, and you still have to build up infrastructure to help, support and mitigate them, or support the mitigation of them. Especially if it's like a political, if your platform is known for political speech, in a particular level. Um,
Yeah. And
Another concern that I kind of have around it is I wonder from like a user point of view, right? So we all have, our online media literacy. And, when you're on a platform that has a wide spectrum of opinions being shared on it, like diverse, users from across the political spectrum, I can imagine people have a little bit more skepticism. They're a little bit more on alert from a media literacy point of view when they see content on a wide spectrum platform. I could easily imagine that like when you're on a platform, that is only your political, people are only from your side of the political spectrum are on it, users might lower their media literacy alert, right? They might become a little bit too trusting of the content on it and not be, alert to influence operations that could be run in it. So there's another concern from the user point of view of like, hopefully users aren't letting their media literacy guard down, just because they think that everyone's, on their side of the political spectrum.
yeah, I think it's this constant balance, right, between like the onus on the user to be able to differentiate, what is real and not real, or authentic or not authentic, or is the onus more on the platform and the product to provide the obvious resources to the user to show them like, oh, this is not authentic. We didn't allow this because it's inauthentic, right? So I think that's always a kind of fine-tuned balance there.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe one more question. We can try to get to it quickly. What are some examples of how trust and safety teams operationalize, meaning sort of like define and measure, narratives and divisive narratives across multiple posts? And has the state of the art there changed since 2020?
Yeah, so I mean, I won't be able to speak because I don't work now directly for an online social media platform. I used to. Um, I'm currently more focused on hopefully supporting technology that creates an easy, validated method to show that a person is authentic online. Um, I think I think that there's two strategies here, two dimensions. One is what do platforms do, right, on their moderation levels and their policy levels of how they detect some of this stuff. Threat network detection has become quite advanced now, I would say, for a lot of platforms, being able to detect, hey, okay, and just like, think of like hundreds and thousands of different heuristics, right? If you create an account with this device, your IMEI model is tracked so that if you create another, restore that, restore your phone and then create another account, and then maybe this phone is then swapped with a SIM card from that phone, and then maybe now you share different IPs. Maybe you're all within the same VPN network, like all of these like, and there's hundreds and thousands of these type of heuristics that security teams now really aggregate and connect the dots to, so that they create threat profiles. It's something that I work closely now on fraud teams and security detection teams with, on creating these kind of proactive rules and threat network analysis. So that on the good news is that is getting better. We're getting better at detecting threat networks in general, and those and what we would consider inauthentic coordinated behavior in that sense. Um, but the other dimension I think is like, how do we better give users that experience of being able to say, I am an authentic, voice on the internet. And if I'm talking to someone, I just want to know that they are also the same authentic, you know, voice on the internet, that they are a unique human being, right? Um, and their political view is theirs and not some person in a foreign country with 100,000 profiles under them. Um, I think there is a separate effort in technology advancement that is gearing towards that, right? And if you wanted to look up some methods for that, there's things like zero knowledge proofs that are very privacy preserving and driven, that are creating particular functions and measures that platforms can use and tap, user APIs and stuff and tap into to utilize those features to prove that you are your unique human being, and the things that you are posting within your profile and content belong to you. This is driven from a fintech perspective as well. We want to make sure that you are who you are when you're banking, but also within the online social media information ecosystem. This applies the same.
Awesome. Well, with that, we're at time. So thank you so much, Nick, for sharing this report and helping us all get up to speed on what the current state is around foreign influence operations and where their kind of trajectory is and where they're going. Super, super valuable. Thank you so much. If you have time, please do fill out a survey on this event that is in the chat and on the LinkedIn chat. And then also, if you found this valuable, please consider donating. You can do that at integrityinstitute.org/support-us. And with that, I will close it out. Thank you all so much for attending. Thank you.
Everybody.